In October 2013, a mother received a phone call that stopped her heart. The number on the screen belonged to her daughter. Her daughter, who had vanished 11 years ago. Sarah Mitchell held her phone with trembling hands. That number had been dead for 11 years. Complete silence. Not a single signal. Nothing. Until that October day, the call lasted barely 3 seconds. Nobody spoke, just silence on the other end. But it was enough to awaken hope Sarah had buried long ago. Emily Mitchell disappeared on August 15, 2002. She was 22 years old. She left home to go to the mall. A normal afternoon, a simple plan. She never came back. For 11 years, her family searched every corner of Phoenix. They posted flyers on every street corner, appeared on television shows, begged for information. Police followed every lead, but Emily had simply vanished, as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Until 11 years later, her cell phone started calling, and what they found when they traced those calls was so disturbing. It changed everything they thought they knew about her disappearance. Because Emily wasn't dead. She was only 2.5 hours away from home, in a place nobody had thought to search, with someone nobody had suspected. And the worst part was this. When they finally found her, she didn't want to be rescued. Before we continue with this shocking story, subscribe and hit the bell. Don't miss any case and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We want to know where our community is. Now let's discover how it all started. Phoenix is a city of over 4 million people in Arizona. A beautiful city with its downtown historic district and modern architecture. But in 2002, it was also a city with growing problems. Drug trafficking, violence, disappearances. Not as bad as some American cities, but people didn't feel as safe. The Arcadia neighborhood was a middle-class area, modest but well-kept homes, neighbors who'd known each other for decades. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone. That's where the Mitchell family lived. Emily Mitchell was 22 in August 2002. She was the only daughter of Sarah and David, the treasure of the family, the apple of their eye. She stood 5'3". Long, dark hair she always wore in a high ponytail. Bright brown eyes, a smile that lit up any room. She studied nursing at Phoenix Community College, 3rd year. Only 2 semesters left until graduation. She dreamed of working at Phoenix General Hospital. She wanted to help low-income families. She was the type of person who thought about others first. Her professors adored her. Classmates sought her out to study together. She explained everything with infinite patience. She didn't have a serious boyfriend. She'd gone out a few times with Michael, a classmate, but nothing serious, nothing committed. She was a responsible girl, organized, reliable, the type of daughter any parent would dream of. Sarah Mitchell worked as a secretary at Phoenix City Hall, 45 years old. She'd been in that job for 20 years. She was a strong woman, hard-working. She'd raised Emily practically alone for several years when David had work troubles. David was a mechanic, 50 years old, big calloused hands from so much work. A man of few words but enormous heart. He'd opened his own garage 5 years earlier, after working for others his whole life. Things were going well. They weren't rich, but they lived comfortably. The 3 of them were close. They had dinner together every night. Sundays they went to church together. Traditions mattered in the Mitchell family. Emily was everything to them. Their only daughter, their reason for living. Tuesday, August 15, 2002, dawned hot in Phoenix. 95 degrees in the shade. One of those summer days where heat hits early and doesn't let go. Emily woke up around 9. She didn't have classes that day. It was summer vacation period. She had breakfast with her mom, coffee with milk, and toast. They talked about nothing in particular. The normal routine of a normal morning. Around noon, Emily told her mom she was going out. I'm going to Desert Ridge to buy some things. A friend asked me to go with her. Sarah didn't even ask which friend or what time she'd return. Emily always checked in, always came back on time. She was a responsible girl, no reason to worry. Desert Ridge Marketplace was about 20 minutes from the Mitchell home. A modern shopping center with well-known stores, movie theaters, restaurants. The place where Phoenix young people spent their afternoons. Emily drove a red Honda Civic, an old but reliable model. Her parents had given it to her when she graduated high school. She arrived at the mall around 2 in the afternoon. Security cameras caught her entering through the main door. She wore a yellow dress her mom had given her for her birthday, white sandals, a small handbag. She looked happy, relaxed, checking her phone while walking. She spent the next hours browsing stores. Cameras caught her in several, trying on clothes, looking at shoes, buying ice cream at the food court, always alone. Nobody accompanied her. The friend she supposedly was meeting never appeared on cameras. The last time cameras caught Emily was at 6:03 in the evening. She was leaving the mall through the main entrance, walking toward the parking lot where she'd left her car. She carried a small bag from a clothing store, still looking at her phone. Parking lot cameras showed her walking between cars looking for her red Civic. She found it parked on the 4th level, an area with few people at that hour. She's seen approaching the car, searching for keys in her bag. And then something happens. Cameras capture a dark vehicle stopping near her. The plate isn't visible, the model isn't clear. Someone gets out of the vehicle. Cameras don't capture well who, because there's a pillar blocking the view. Emily seems to talk with that person. She doesn't seem scared, doesn't seem to be running away. After approximately 2 minutes, Emily gets into the dark vehicle. The vehicle leaves the parking lot. The red Civic stays there, with Emily's keys inside, with her shopping bag in the back seat. Emily Mitchell had just disappeared. Sarah started worrying around 9 at night. Emily always gave notice if she'd be late. She always answered her phone. But that night her phone rang and rang with nobody answering. Sarah called David at the garage. He came home running. They called Emily's friends. Nobody had seen her. Nobody knew who she'd gone to the mall with. At 10 at night they went to Desert Ridge. They found Emily's Civic still parked on the 4th level, exactly where she'd left it. Right then they knew something was very wrong. They went straight to the police. The formal report was filed at 11:30 on the night of August 15th. Commander James Rodriguez took the case. 50 years old, over 2 decades in Phoenix police. He'd seen many missing person cases, too many in recent years. But something about this case caught his attention. A responsible girl, no problems, no enemies, who simply gets into an unknown car and disappears. The first days were intense. They reviewed mall cameras 100 times, interviewed employees, security guards, anyone who'd been there that day. They checked Emily's phone, call history, messages. They found something interesting. During the 3 weeks before her disappearance, Emily had received several calls from an unknown number. Short calls, 2 or 3 minutes maximum. Records showed Emily had answered all those calls. When police traced the number, they discovered it was a prepaid phone, purchased with fake documents at a convenience store. Impossible to trace the owner. The calls had been made from different cell towers, some in Phoenix, others in nearby rural areas. Whoever was calling was constantly moving, or knew how to avoid being traced. Police interrogated Michael, the classmate Emily had dated a few times. The guy was devastated when he learned of the disappearance, but his alibi was solid. On August 15th, he'd been working at his dad's mechanic shop, from 10 in the morning until 8 at night. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. He had nothing to do with it. They also interrogated professors, classmates, neighbors. Everyone said the same thing. Emily was a normal girl. No problems, no secrets. Nobody had any idea who could have taken her or why. The months passed as if time had become thick under Phoenix sun. Sarah lost almost 30 pounds in 6 months. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. David started drinking more than he should. He'd come home with red eyes, not just from alcohol, but from tears he didn't want to shed. The house filled with heavy silence. The Arcadia neighborhood community rallied around the family. Neighbor women brought food every day. The men organized search groups. They covered every corner of the city. They posted thousands of flyers on poles, in stores, on every possible corner. With Emily's smiling photo and the family's number, the parish organized masses asking for her return. August 15, 2003 was devastating. 1 full year without Emily. The family organized a vigil in front of downtown Phoenix. More than 200 people arrived with lit candles, with photos of Emily, with prayers. Local media covered the event. For a few days, the case was news again. New leads arrived, all false, supposed sightings that led nowhere. Police kept working, but resources had been redistributed toward more recent cases. Commander Rodriguez kept pushing. He'd developed a personal relationship with the Mitchell family. But reality was clear. After a year without solid leads, chances of finding Emily alive were almost zero. 2004 arrived without answers. David fell into deep depression. He missed so much work he finally lost his job at the garage. The family economy collapsed. Sarah had to look for additional work. She cleaned offices at night after her city hall shift. The savings they'd kept for Emily's last semesters ran out. Gas money to follow false leads. Printing flyers offered rewards. Economic pain added to emotional pain. During the 3rd year, Sarah found a support group for families of missing persons. They met Tuesday nights at a community center. There she met Linda Vasquez. Her son had disappeared 2 years earlier. Linda had channeled her pain into activism. She organized demonstrations, pressured authorities. Her strength inspired Sarah. Together they formed the Missing Persons Support Group of Phoenix. A group that constantly grew with new members, each bringing their own tragedies. The group organized monthly marches through downtown. They carried photographs of their missing family members. They demanded answers from authorities. Slowly, Emily's case appeared in the news again, always as part of a broader statistic. But at least it wasn't forgotten. Sarah found purpose in helping other families, other mothers just beginning the same terrible journey. She became expert at navigating bureaucracy, knowing which doors to knock on, how to pressure so cases wouldn't be filed away. Her house became refuge for mothers who needed to cry, with someone who understood. David gradually joined the group more quietly. He repaired cars for families without resources, photographically documented demonstrations. Little by little, he found a way to keep living. The anniversaries passed one after another. Each August 15th was a reminder of the day their lives split in two. Emily's room remained exactly as she'd left it. Sarah cleaned it religiously every week, changed the sheets, watered the plants. David had suggested converting that space into something more functional, maybe an office for the group. But Sarah resisted. Keeping that room intact was her way of believing Emily would return. The nursing books remained on the desk. Her white uniform hung in the closet. Photos on the walls, each image a reminder of what they'd lost. 11 years and almost 2 months had passed since the disappearance. Sarah had found a new version of herself. She was no longer just the desperate mother. She was a community leader, a voice authorities listened to. But at night, the pain remained as sharp as the first day. On October 12, 2013, Sarah was making coffee in the kitchen when her phone started ringing. The number that appeared on the screen stole her breath. It was Emily's number, the same one that had been dead for 11 years. With hands shaking so much she almost dropped the phone, Sarah answered. On the other side, only silence was heard. But it was a different silence. The silence of someone who's there breathing. Sarah whispered, "Emily?" The call cut off. Who had called from Emily's phone after 11 years of silence? Was she alive, or had someone found her phone? And why right now after so long? In the next part, we're going to discover something. How that call reopened the case with an intensity nobody expected. How the calls kept coming, each one with a new mystery. And how police finally started tracing a truth nobody had imagined. If you want to know what happened next, like this video, share it with someone who likes true stories, and subscribe for part 2, where the truth begins coming to light. Sarah stood frozen, staring at her phone. Emily had just been on the other side, or someone with her phone, after 11 years of absolute silence. David arrived home from the garage and found his wife sitting at the kitchen table, holding the phone with both hands, crying in a way she hadn't done in years. When she told him what had happened, David felt the world tilt beneath his feet. That same night, they called Commander Rodriguez. Even though it was late, Rodriguez headed immediately to the Mitchell home. His experience told him these types of events could be cruel jokes or extortion attempts, but he couldn't rule out that it was real. Rodriguez immediately contacted technicians from the phone company. Records showed something puzzling. The call had been made from a cell tower located near Flagstaff, a rural area about 2.5 hours north of Phoenix. The strangest part was this. Emily's old cell phone from 2002 had somehow been powered back on. The number that had been inactive for 11 years had been reactivated that same day. Paid for with a prepaid card purchased with cash at a convenience store. Detectives mobilized immediately towards the Flagstaff area, a region known for its pine forests and ranches, an area where it was easy to go unnoticed. Many isolated ranches, small communities where people didn't ask too many questions. The rugged, mountainous landscape offered endless hiding places. The prepaid card had been purchased by a man approximately 30 years old. Tall, thin, nervous, according to the store employee. He'd insisted on buying the card with the highest balance available. He paid cash, gave no identification. The store's security cameras had been broken for months. There was no visual record. Meanwhile, Sarah's phone didn't ring again, but she kept it by her side 24 hours, compulsively checking that it had battery and signal. David practically didn't sleep for 3 days, getting up every time he heard any sound remotely similar to a phone. The hope they'd managed to control for 11 years now consumed them. On the 4th day, the phone rang again. This time David was present. The call lasted approximately 10 seconds. Someone's breathing was clearly heard, even what seemed to be wind or traffic in the background. Sarah shouted her daughter's name several times. The call cut off without anyone speaking. Technicians traced this second call to a different tower, this time on the highway connecting Flagstaff with Sedona. This suggested whoever was making the calls was moving through the region, possibly in a vehicle. Detectives began patrolling those highways, but the area was vast. Chances of intercepting someone specific without more information were minimal. News of the mysterious calls leaked to the media. Soon, the story went viral on social networks. The hashtag Justice for Emily started trending. The Facebook page Sarah had created years ago began receiving thousands of new followers. National media sent reporters to Phoenix. The Mitchell home filled with cameras and microphones for the first time in years. Linda Vasquez and the other mothers from the support group organized to protect Sarah and David. They created shifts to handle interviews. They made sure the family had space to process everything. Experience had taught them that media attention was both blessing and curse. During the 3rd week, a pattern was established. The phone rang every 3 or 4 days, always from different locations in the rural region. Calls never lasted more than 15 seconds. Whoever was calling never spoke. But the presence of someone on the other side was undeniable. Detectives determined the calls were being made from the same physical device, each time a single person was responsible. Technical analysis revealed something disturbing. The phone had been reactivated with Emily's original SIM card. This meant whoever had the phone also had access to her personal information and her complete call history from years ago, which implied 2 possibilities. Emily was alive and making the calls herself, or someone had found her old phone and was using it. Investigators split into 2 groups. Detective Martinez believed the calls were evidence Emily was alive, possibly held against her will. Detective Ramirez maintained someone was using the phone to psychologically torture the family, possibly as part of an extortion scheme. Sarah didn't know what to believe. Each call filled her with painful hope that kept her awake. David, more skeptical, feared someone was playing with their emotions in the cruelest way possible, but both agreed they needed to follow all leads, no matter how remote they were. On the 7th call that arrived on a rainy Tuesday in November, something changed. Besides the usual breathing, a female voice was heard very faintly. "Mom." Just that word before the line cut off. Sarah almost fainted. David kept calm enough to record the call with his own phone. Audio analysis confirmed what Sarah had heard. A young female voice had pronounced the word "mom." However, quality was so poor they couldn't determine with certainty if it was Emily's voice. Experts said they'd need a longer sample to make a definitive comparison. This new evidence galvanized the investigation. Commander Rodriguez assigned additional resources to the case, including a team specialized in hostage rescue. A temporary command center was established in Flagstaff. Experts in negotiation were brought in case calls eventually became direct contact. Media pressure intensified dramatically. National media sent complete teams. The story began receiving international attention. During this period, false leads started arriving from across the country. People claiming they'd seen Emily in Seattle, in New York, in Miami. Each lead required verification, dispersing resources. Linda suggested the family needed to temporarily get away from the media circus. She arranged for Sarah and David to stay in a safe house, provided by a human rights organization, where they could have privacy while detectives continued their work. In the quiet of that house, Sarah had time to reflect. She'd changed so much during these 11 years. Sometimes she didn't recognize herself in the mirror. Before she was a woman worried about domestic routines and office work. Now she was capable of confronting authorities and national media. But deep down she remained simply a mother who wanted to get her daughter back. The 8th call arrived while they were at the safe house. For the first time in weeks, they could receive it without camera pressure. This time, audio quality was slightly better. Besides breathing, the sound of what seemed to be heavy machinery was clearly heard. Experts determined it could be noise from a processing plant or a mine, both common industries in the mountainous region of Arizona. This new clue led investigators to focus their search on abandoned or functioning industrial facilities. Arizona had a long mining history. Many small operations had closed, leaving empty structures. There were also processing plants scattered throughout the rural region. The team began systematic inspection of each industrial facility within a 30-mile radius. During inspection of an abandoned cement processing plant near Sedona, they found evidence of recent occupation. Food remains, old blankets, what appeared to be cut chains. Forensic tests revealed presence of female DNA on the blankets, but results would take weeks to be processed. to determine if it corresponded to Emily. The 9th call arrived 3 days later. This time the female voice was clearer. She pronounced a complete sentence. "Mom, I'm okay. Don't look for me anymore." The call lasted almost 30 seconds. Time enough to trace it. New location, near the border between Arizona and New Mexico. Voice analysis was conclusive. It was definitely Emily who had spoken. However, the tone suggested she was under some type of coercion. Forensic psychology experts noted the message seemed rehearsed. The words "don't look for me anymore" were inconsistent with someone who voluntarily made contact after 11 years. This confirmation completely transformed the investigation. It was no longer a missing person case. It was an active case of kidnapping and illegal deprivation of liberty. Investigators began developing a profile. It was clearly someone with intimate knowledge of the region, possibly a local resident. He had access to multiple properties or hideouts. The calls came from different locations each time. The fact he'd kept Emily alive for 11 years suggested complex motivation. Forensic psychologists speculated about serious mental disorders or an obsession with the victim. They began reviewing old cases, harassment complaints, suspicious behaviors. They interviewed Emily's teachers, her parents' co-workers, neighborhood residents. They were looking for someone who'd shown unusual interest in the Mitchell family. The 10th call brought puzzling surprise. This time, instead of Emily's voice, a mature male voice was heard. "She's safe with me. Stop searching or you're going to hurt her." The tone was threatening, but also protective. It suggested a complex relationship between kidnapper and victim. Negotiators interpreted this as a sign the kidnapper felt pressured. It was common in these cases for captors to begin communicating directly when they felt their control was slipping. This could be both an opportunity for rescue and a moment of greater danger. Protocol was established for future calls. Professional negotiators prepared to attempt establishing dialogue. The goal was to keep him talking as long as possible, to obtain information about location and mental state. During systematic interviews in rural communities, the first solid clue emerged. An elderly woman named Grace Morrison lived on a ranch outside Sedona. She remembered something important. About 3 or 4 years earlier, around 2009 or 2010, she'd seen a young woman who resembled Emily. The young woman had appeared in town accompanied by an older man. They'd bought provisions at the local store before heading toward the mountains. What made this particularly interesting was this. Grace specifically remembered the young woman had seemed sick or drugged, moving slowly and confused. The man had done all the shopping while she remained in the vehicle. Grace had assumed she was a tourist who'd drunk too much, but now seeing Emily's photos on the news, she began wondering if she'd witnessed something more sinister. Detectives intensified their search in that specific area, using drones and thermal tracking equipment to explore mountainous zones of difficult access. The terrain was treacherous, deep canyons, rock formations that could conceal structures for decades. It was the type of landscape where someone could keep a person captive without being detected, especially if they had local knowledge of the area. Meanwhile, calls continued their irregular pattern, crossing data from people who'd purchased properties in the region, old harassment complaints, suspicious behaviors. A name emerged: Robert Anderson, 60 years old. He'd been an elementary school teacher for over 20 years. He was fired in 2003 for inappropriate behavior toward female students. He'd faced several harassment complaints, but was never criminally prosecuted, due to lack of evidence. After his dismissal, he inherited a ranch from a distant uncle, and moved there, apparently to live as a hermit. His former colleagues described him as intelligent but socially maladjusted, with obsessive tendencies and particular fascination with rescuing young women he perceived as vulnerable. Investigators identified Anderson's ranch. It was registered under his name, but official records indicated it had been abandoned. However, surveillance showed signs of recent occupation. Nighttime lights in supposedly empty buildings, vehicle movement during unusual hours. Discreet surveillance was established using drones and distance observation. They didn't want to alert the kidnapper. For several days, they observed the movement pattern. Anderson moved between different buildings. He seemed to be preparing for something. Was Robert Anderson really the one who had Emily? And if it was him, what had he been doing with her for 11 years? Why now, after so long, had he allowed her to make contact? In the final part, we're going to discover something incredible: how police planned the most complex rescue operation in Phoenix history, how they finally found Emily in a place nobody had imagined, and the disturbing truth about what happened to her during those 11 years of captivity. If this story has you in suspense, like it. Share it with someone who likes true stories, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the shocking finale, where all the truth comes to light. The 11th call arrived only 2 days later. This time Anderson seemed more willing to talk. "She doesn't want to go back with you. She's learned to live a better life here. Stop hurting her with these searches." The negotiator managed to keep the conversation going for almost 5 minutes. Anderson inadvertently revealed he knew intimate details about Emily's life: her dream of being a nurse, her relationship with her parents. This suggested he'd been watching her for a significant period before the kidnapping. He also mentioned Emily had chosen to stay with him. Psychologists identified this as typical of Stockholm Syndrome, or prolonged brainwashing. 11 years had been enough to develop complex psychological dependence. During that conversation, crucial background sounds were heard. Experts identified the sound of cattle, agricultural machinery, and the distant sound of a church bell. This indicated proximity to a religious community. Crossing this data with maps, they identified 12 cattle ranches close enough to churches. They began discreet inspections using drones and distance surveillance. It was during surveillance of the 5th ranch they noticed suspicious activity. Robert Anderson's ranch showed constant movement, nighttime lights, vehicles at unusual hours. During the 12th call, the negotiator casually mentioned the name Robert. There was prolonged silence. Then the kidnapper hung up abruptly. This confirmed his identity. It also indicated he'd realized investigators were close. The next days were crucial. Teams observed significant increase in activity. Anderson moving constantly between buildings, apparently preparing to evacuate. Experts warned this was the moment of greatest danger for Emily. Kidnappers in this situation often make desperate decisions. The decision was made to accelerate the rescue operation. A joint team of National Guard and state special forces established perimeter around the ranch. It was the early morning of November 28, 2013. The plan was to approach silently, neutralize Anderson before he could harm Emily. The operation began at 4:30 in the morning, taking advantage of darkness and using night vision technology. Teams approached from multiple directions, coordinating movements in silence. When they reached the main building, they found clear evidence of Emily's prolonged presence: female clothing, medications, improvised living space, relatively comfortable. However, both Anderson and Emily had disappeared, leaving behind signs of hasty evacuation. Investigators found revealing documents, photographs of Emily taken secretly during months before the kidnapping, studies of her daily routines, elaborate narrative about how he was saving her from an unsatisfying life. They also found diaries written by Emily during captivity. The diaries were heartbreaking. The first entries showed terror and desperation. But gradually they evolved toward resignation, and eventually toward emotional dependence on her captor. The diaries also provided clues about other hideouts, She mentioned the mountain house, the canyon refuge. Anderson had established multiple locations where he could take Emily. If the ranch were discovered, teams deployed immediately toward more remote mountainous areas. Using helicopters, tracking dogs, thermal technology, it was a race against time. Anderson had clearly become more desperate and unpredictable. That same afternoon, the 13th call arrived. From a completely new location near the border with New Mexico. Anderson sounded frankly paranoid and threatening. "You've scared her with all this pursuit. Now she doesn't want to talk to you. If you don't stop, we'll disappear forever." Negotiators worked carefully to maintain calm, assuring him they only wanted to verify Emily was okay. Anderson showed himself slightly receptive, but insisted any encounter would be on his terms. During the following hours, a series of complex communications was established. Anderson agreed to allow Emily to speak briefly with her parents, but only if teams withdrew to a safe distance. It was a calculated risk, but negotiators decided it was the best opportunity. The 14th call was the most emotional. Emily spoke directly with Sarah for the first time in 11 years. "I'm okay, Mom. I've learned many things here. Robert has taken good care of me." The voice sounded strangely calm, controlled. Sarah struggled to maintain composure, asking about her health, trying to transmit all her love. David also had opportunity to exchange words, though Anderson could be heard in the background directing the conversation. The most revealing thing was what Emily didn't say. She didn't mention wanting to return. She didn't express fear, didn't ask for help. She seemed genuinely concerned about Anderson's well-being. This confirmed Stockholm Syndrome. The next days brought delicate negotiations. Anderson established a pattern of regular communication, calling every day at the same time. He seemed genuinely convinced he was protecting Emily. He'd developed elaborate narrative about how the life he offered was superior. During these conversations, disturbing details emerged. Anderson had systematically isolated Emily from the outside world, controlling all information she received, creating alternate reality where he was her protector and savior. He'd used sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques, alternating periods of extreme kindness with subtle threats of abandonment. He'd also been providing continuing education, herbal medicine, agriculture, philosophy according to his distorted interpretation. In his mind, he was preparing her for a better, purer life. During this period, teams finally managed to identify exact location. A cabin in an abandoned hunting area, in a deep canyon, accessible only by narrow, treacherous trail. The location was so remote, it explained why they'd managed to remain hidden so long. The final operation was scheduled to coincide with one of the regular calls, when Anderson's attention would be focused on phone conversation. Teams approached silently during hours before dawn, establishing strategic positions around the cabin. When the 16th call began, teams moved simultaneously. Anderson was taken completely by surprise. He surrendered without resistance when he realized he was surrounded. His main concern seemed to be ensuring Emily wouldn't get hurt. Emily was found in relatively good physical condition, though clearly affected psychologically by years of captivity. Her initial reaction to rescue was confusion and anxiety, showing more concern for Anderson's well-being than relief for her own liberation. This confirmed extent of psychological conditioning. The reunion with her parents was bittersweet. While Sarah and David cried with relief and joy, Emily seemed distant and overwhelmed. It was evident she'd need significant time to readjust, to rebuild family relationships altered by 11 years. Anderson was arrested immediately. He faced multiple charges: kidnapping, illegal deprivation of liberty, psychological abuse. During subsequent interrogations, he maintained his conviction he'd been protecting Emily. showing complete lack of understanding about the criminality of his actions. The following months were a difficult adjustment period for the entire family. Emily required intensive therapy to address captivity trauma and effects of Stockholm Syndrome. At first, she didn't even want to talk with therapists. She insisted Robert hadn't hurt her, that he'd protected her. She said she missed the cabin's tranquility, that the outside world was too noisy, too chaotic. Sarah cried every night hearing these words. The first 3 months were the most difficult. Emily had panic attacks when there were many people around. She couldn't sleep in her room because it felt too open. Therapists explained that for 11 years, she'd lived in small, controlled spaces. Her brain needed time to readjust. She'd also developed intense fear of disappointing people, a direct effect of Anderson's manipulation. For years, he'd repeated her parents didn't want her, that they'd forgotten her, that only he valued her. Breaking those beliefs took months of daily therapy. Little by little, Emily began remembering who she'd been before. Her dreams of being a nurse, her love for her parents, her life before Robert. But she also had to accept she'd never be exactly that person again. 11 years had changed her fundamentally. Sarah and David also needed psychological support. The joy of recovering their daughter mixed with pain, of seeing how she'd been transformed, and guilt for not having been able to protect her initially. They learned in family therapy not to pressure her, to respect her process, to celebrate small victories. The day Emily hugged them voluntarily for the first time in 4 months. They all cried for hours. The day she genuinely smiled for the first time was like seeing the sun after years of darkness. The day she said, "I'm happy to be home," was the greatest gift they could receive. Experts warned it would take years, possibly decades, for Emily to fully recover. Some effects of trauma would be permanent, but human capacity to heal is surprising. And Emily was proving to be stronger than anyone had imagined. In April 2014, Robert Anderson was tried. The evidence was overwhelming. Emily's diaries, the photographs, the documents. Everything pointed to a decades-long obsession. The defense argued Anderson suffered from severe mental disorders, that he needed treatment, not prison. The prosecution presented evidence of meticulous planning, of clear understanding of his actions. The jury deliberated 3 days. The verdict was guilty on all charges. Robert Anderson was sentenced to 40 years in prison, without possibility of parole. 1 year after the rescue, Emily had made significant progress, though the process continued being slow. In March 2014, she returned to nursing school, starting over. Only 2 classes at first, taking it slow. Then gradually 3, building her confidence back. Her classmates received her with warmth, but also with curiosity. That sometimes was uncomfortable. Everyone knew her story. Everyone wanted to know how she was. Emily learned to say, "I'm fine, thanks," without elaborating, to maintain healthy boundaries, to protect her privacy. Professors gave her extensions on assignments, additional support, understanding when she needed to miss for therapy appointments. Slowly, she recovered her love for nursing. She remembered why she'd chosen that career, the desire to help others, to make a difference. In June, she completed her first semester back, with excellent grades. She cried when she received her grades, not because of the grades themselves, but because of what they represented. Proof she could get her life back. That Robert hadn't won. That she was stronger than her trauma. Her relationship with her parents strengthened day by day, though everyone understood it would never be exactly like before. There were invisible scars, moments of tension, memories that hurt. But there were also new rituals, new ways to connect. Sundays they cooked together, recipes Emily had learned during captivity mixed with traditional family dishes. Tuesday nights they watched movies, Emily choosing light comedies, nothing violent, nothing that could trigger her traumas. Fridays, Sarah and Emily went walking through downtown, talking or simply enjoying shared silence. David built a small garden in the backyard. Emily helped him plant. The earth between her fingers was therapeutic, connecting her with something real and alive. There were nights when nightmares woke her. She dreamed she was still in the cabin, that everything had been an illusion, that they'd never rescued her. Sarah heard her cry and entered her room. She sat on the bed, reminded her where she was, that she was safe, that it was real. There were days when anxiety paralyzed her, when leaving home seemed impossible, when facing the world was too much. But there were also good moments, increasingly frequent. Genuine laughter, plans for the future, hope that life could be beautiful again. Emily's case became a national reference point. Techniques used to trace phone calls were adopted as a model. The Missing Persons Support Group of Phoenix used the experience to advocate for better resources. Sarah continued her activism work, now with unique perspective of someone who'd lived both the nightmare and the recovery. She traveled to other cities sharing Emily's story, speaking at conferences about missing persons and family resilience. Her testimony became a powerful tool for legislative change. Several states implemented new protocols for handling long-term missing person cases, inspired directly by lessons learned from Emily's disappearance. The support group Sarah helped found grew into a nationwide network, connecting families across America who shared similar tragedies. They created online databases, organized annual conferences, provided legal assistance to families navigating complex investigations. Linda Vasquez became Sarah's closest friend and partner in this work. Together they testified before Congress about the need for better resources, for families of missing persons, and improved coordination between state agencies. Their advocacy led to the creation of specialized task forces in multiple states, dedicated solely to cold cases and long-term disappearances. Emily herself eventually found strength to speak publicly about her experience. 2 years after her rescue, she gave her first interview on a national morning show watched by millions. She spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision, learned through extensive therapy. She described the confusion of Stockholm Syndrome, the way her mind had protected itself by rewriting reality, making her captor into her savior because the alternative was unbearable. Her honesty shocked viewers, but also educated them about the complex psychology of captivity and the long road to recovery. Mental health professionals praised her courage, saying her testimony would help countless other survivors understand their own experiences. Emily's story also sparked important conversations about how society views victims of long-term captivity. Many people had initially questioned why she hadn't escaped, why she'd seemed to defend her captor. Emily's public discussion of Stockholm Syndrome helped shift that narrative. People began understanding that psychological captivity can be as powerful as physical chains, that victims shouldn't be blamed for survival mechanisms their minds created. The story of the mysterious calls had become local legend, a reminder both of horrors that can lurk in shadows and of persistence of family love. This story teaches us painful but important lessons. First, that monsters aren't always strangers. Sometimes they're people who seem normal. Teachers, neighbors, people who go unnoticed. Robert Anderson worked with children for 20 years. Nobody suspected what he was capable of doing. Second, that Stockholm Syndrome is real and devastating. Emily wasn't physically chained during most of her captivity. The chains were in her mind. Anderson manipulated her so effectively she believed he was saving her. Third, that technology can be both tool of evil and good. Phone calls were Anderson's way of maintaining control, but they were also what led to his capture. Fourth, that recovery from trauma like this doesn't have a simple happy ending. Emily is alive, she's with her family, but she'll never be the same person she was before. The 11 years she lost will never be recovered. If this story impacted you, share it. Not for morbidity, but to create awareness about thousands of missing persons in America, in the world, about families who never lose hope, even though years pass, about importance of keeping these cases alive, of not allowing them to become forgotten statistics. The Missing Persons Support Group of Phoenix continues working. Linda Vasquez still searches for her son. Sarah now helps her search. There are hundreds of Emilys out there waiting to be found. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories like this. Stories that matter, that create awareness, that can make a difference. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new case. Leave your like if this story made you reflect. About the crisis of disappearances. And tell us in the comments, do you know a similar case? Have you heard about missing persons support groups? Your voice matters. Your attention to these cases matters. Because together we can create pressure for authorities to take every disappearance seriously, so every family receives the resources they need, so no mother has to wait 11 years to know what happened to her daughter. Thank you for watching this story of loss, hope, and the long road toward recovery. Thank you for taking time to know Emily and her family. And thank you for helping us spread a message that can save lives. Emily's cell phone, which was the connection between two worlds during those terrible months, now rests in a drawer. Occasionally, Sarah takes it in her hands, remembering each call, each moment of hope and desperation. It was a small object that had contained so much pain, and finally so much miracle. Emily's room in the Arcadia neighborhood house finally had life again. It's no longer a shrine frozen in time. It's the space of a young woman who survived the unimaginable and is slowly rebuilding her place in the world, one day at a time. See you in the next case. But before you go, remember this. If you know someone who's searching for a missing family member, share this story with them, so they know they're not alone, so they know hope exists, and so they know there are entire communities of people fighting for the same answers. Until next time.